The first time Armin Hale touched the billionaire CEO's computer, his hands were shaking. Not from fear of technology, but from the weight of a life that had taught him to expect nothing and brace for worse. The hum of the server room wrapped around him like a warning, screens blinking with numbers that never cared about exhaustion or grief. And in that sterile glow, a single dad with a borrowed badge stood inches away from a future he never imagined. He fixed broken things for a living, but nothing had prepared him for the moment when everything would suddenly look back at him and ask to be seen. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet power of doing the right thing when no one is watching, take a second to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindora Life. Your support keeps stories like this alive. Armin's mornings always began with sunlight spilling across a small kitchen table where his son's backpack waited like a promise. Daytime was when Armin felt strongest, when the world seemed to forgive him a little for the nights spent worrying about rent and school lunches. Since his wife passed 2 years earlier, life had narrowed into careful routines. Get his son to school, work extra shifts repairing computers for offices that never learned his name, and return home before dusk to help with homework and heat canned soup. He never complained, not because it didn't hurt, but because his son's smile needed stability more than his sorrow needed air. That morning, a call came from a high-rise downtown, a company rumored to run on impossible expectations and brilliant minds. A critical system was down, and their internal team had failed. Armin took the job because he always did, because fixing things was how he kept the lights on and his son's future intact. When he arrived, daylight poured through glass walls into a server room that felt like a cathedral of ambition. Employees whispered as he passed, not unkindly, just unaware that someone like him could matter there. At the center of it all was Rhea Calder, the billionaire CEO whose presence bent the room without a word. She was known for relentless standards, a mind sharpened by years of fighting to be taken seriously in rooms that once shut her out. The day had already tested her. Deadlines were collapsing, investors were calling, and the system failure threatened more than profits. It threatened her belief that control could always be reclaimed with enough effort. When Armin knelt beside the terminal, he felt her attention settle on him, not as judgment, but as a last hope. He worked quietly, letting muscle memory guide him through corrupted files and hidden faults. The hours slipped by under the steady glow of monitors, and slowly, the system breathed back to life. Data flowed, screens stabilized. A hush fell, the kind that follows a miracle no one expected. Armin wiped his hands, relief loosening his shoulders, ready to leave before anyone remembered he existed. But something shifted in the room. Rhea lingered, not at the console, but near him. Daylight caught in the glass walls, softening the sharp angles of her world. For a woman surrounded by brilliance and pressure, there was a fragile pause in her posture, as if she'd stepped out of armor she wore too long. She asked him a question, not about code or servers, but about herself, and Armin froze. No one had ever asked him to see them like that, not a woman whose name echoed across headlines and boardrooms. In that moment, Armin felt the distance between their worlds collapse into something human. He thought of his wife's laugh in the kitchen sunlight, of the way she once asked him if he still saw her the same after exhaustion dulled her spark. He understood then that power and wealth did not erase loneliness, they only hid it better. His answer was simple and unguarded, shaped by a life that had learned to value truth over polish. He spoke with kindness, not flattery, and the room seemed to exhale. Rhea didn't smile the way magazines showed her smiling. She softened, as if a long-held breath finally found release. The system was fixed, but something else had been repaired too. A quiet fracture neither of them had named. She thanked him, not with authority but with gratitude, and offered him a card, not as charity, but as connection. Armin left the building under the same daylight he'd arrived in, yet the city felt altered, as if it had tilted just enough to let hope in. Days passed, and life returned to routine, but routine no longer felt small. Armin found himself invited back, not to fix emergencies, but to consult, to teach, to be valued. The work paid better, the hours steadier. More importantly, it gave him evenings free to sit with his son under the warm afternoon light, listening to stories about school and dreams about the future. He didn't tell his son everything, only that sometimes being kind when you're tired opens doors you didn't know existed. For Ria, the encounter lingered too. In a world of praise and critique, sincerity had become rare currency. She began walking through her company during the day, noticing faces, learning names, asking questions that had nothing to do with profit. The culture shifted subtly, like sunlight moving across a floor. Slow, but undeniable. Success no longer felt as lonely when it was shared with people who were seen. The day Armin brought his son to visit the office, daylight filled the halls with laughter. Ria watched from a distance, recognizing the quiet heroism in a man who had rebuilt a life without applause. She realized that strength wasn't always loud, and beauty wasn't always mirrored back by wealth. Sometimes it lived in persistence, in showing up, in fixing what you could, and loving what remained. Just before the ending, special request. Please comment below and tell us which moment stayed with you the most. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that kindness can cross any divide and that second chances often arrive disguised as ordinary days, please like, comment, and share this video. Your engagement helps stories like Armin's reach others who need to believe again. In the end, under the steady glow of daytime skies, two lives continued on separate paths that now ran parallel, connected by a moment of honesty. A single dad went home each afternoon knowing he was enough, and a billionaire CEO looked into the glass walls of her world and finally saw herself clearly. And somewhere between servers humming and sunlight warming the city, Hope learned how to speak softly and still be heard.